It's hot out here. Heeding God's call. Matthew 22:14 says, "For many are called, but few are chosen." You know, this week I connected with a friend that owns a local gun shop here in Maryland. And when I arrived at the gun shop, I saw he was being picketed by about 10 senior citizens holding signs asking people to honk their horns in support of ending gun violence, or some variant of the theme. Yeah, that's what I thought too. So I got in my car, walked over to the first brother that was close to me, actually a senior guy, and I said, "Who are you guys?" And he says, "We're members of an interfaith group called Heeding God's Call." He said he and another person were the only Catholics, but most of them were Presbyterian or Episcopalian. I kind of nodded my head, okay. Tell me some more. So he kind of fumbled a little bit, and a lady saw him, and she came down. She was the secretary from the group, and she says, "Walk with me, and I'll tell you all about us, and I'll give you a brochure from the back of the car." So she put her sign in, found out that they do this every Monday from 5 to 6, and she gave me a brochure and a flyer, and she said that they were interfaith, but she wasn't religious at all, and they had no Jews and no Muslims in their group, which I thought was interesting, and thanked me for my interest, and off they went. I did take a picture of a guy though right before I asked him. I said, "Hey man, can I take your photo?" And he says, "You want my face too?" And I said, "If you don't mind, I don't mind." So you to protest a gun shop for gun violence. That was something. I mean, I heard it all before, but that was different. So I thanked him, went on inside the shop, talked to my man Carlos. The premise for their righteous indignation is violence. Can't argue with that. Everything else they do is wrong. They blame guns for everything, except maybe the Mars landing. They blame Rialco guns. They blame firearms retailers because they are so sweet and kind and elderly and infirm that they'll get sympathy from just about everybody. And they're basically bullies. Yeah, I know, I call them bullies. But see, they want firearms retailers to sign a code of conduct that they wrote. That's 1, unnecessary, 2, unrealistic, and 3, it's unconstitutional. But how can I say that? Well, see, they want gun stores to videotape you when you're making a purchase. They are totally unaware of the NICS check, the waiting periods here in Maryland, the state background check requirements, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives requirements that are already in place for federal firearms license holders that already require extreme investigation, inventory, security, background checks, and more transparency than any other American business. Now, you may find this hard to believe, but they have been supported by Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a group called AHSA, and other gun prohibitionists. Yeah, I know. I looked them up. I did a little bit of research. When I finally got in to talk to my friend, he was a little distraught over this whole thing, because he's become the poster child for all the violence in Maryland. I mean, the guy's a decent guy, better than decent guy. I mean, he has a ministry of his own, of grief counseling. And this has been going on since like 2011, maybe longer. What if you had this store? What if this was your store? What if your American dream was to sell firearms in a culture, in a neighborhood like this? Let me tell you about this store. When it opened in this neighborhood, it wasn't as bad as it is now. When it was opened by 2 brothers named Del Real, who have a long history immigrating as first generation Americans coming from Cuba. They've been here 40 years. I've known them 30. I've interacted with them off and on, maybe once or twice a year, and more in the last couple of years, just because, well, the last couple of decades, because of being a gun rights activist. But they interact with regular people. I mean, not people that are competitive shooters, safari hunters, or high-speed operators, just regular people trying to either learn about firearms for themselves, have a gun for self-defense or enjoy recreational shooting. I've seen them at gun shows. I've seen them survive through the last 3 decades of politics, of scrutiny from people, and just the shutdown of all small home-owned firearms dealers. They've survived all that in the last 30 years. And right now, they're the only game in town. So if a firearm is stolen, burglarized, taken from teens at school, lost in a vehicle, elderly, ripped off, whatever, improperly stored, it's going to get traced back to this shop because this is the only game in town in PG County. So the demonstrations are basically unfair, and they're incorrectly aimed at my man. The real bad part is other dealers, firearms people won't even console him or give him at least a pat on the back or encouragement because they're just glad it ain't them. And because he's a competitor, they're glad that Heat and God's call folks in out of their door. It's kind of bad like that. Anti-gun politicians allow this group to flourish because it looks more acceptable to the elite that promote this stuff than they can. So they let it happen. The people that purchase guns today, what I found are the best in America. I can say so because they've been subjected to background checks. They've been vetted, they've been fingerprinted, facial recognition. Can you say that about, Uncle Joe in your household, your cousin? Probably not. What everybody fails to realize is that criminals are unaffected by additional gun laws. Gun laws only affect the law-abiding. There's no such thing as gun violence. There's just violence. But heeding God's call to get one thing right. It is a faith-based problem. It is. Our problem is the moral decay of our society. Our problem is the hopelessness of people. Our problem is the dependency of our people on the government. Our problem is spiritual. We have forgotten the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Not all of us. Thank God.